Joe Smith, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really good. It is so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
100%. I'm super grateful that you were able to carve out some time for this. I know you mentioned a clan of a family, 4 kids, right?
Four kids. Yeah, we have three boys. Azai is 8, Indigo 6, Rivers 3. And then we were committed to getting a girl. And so me and my wife, we people say they pray about it all the time. We really did pray about it. And we said, all right, we're gonna go one more. And if we have another boy, God is telling us we are a boy family. But thankfully he had some grace on us. And we have a baby girl who's 1 year old named Rocky. And so
Amazing. Congratulations. I
thank
mean,
you.
I guess this is going to be a different first question than I usually ask, but if you had another boy, would you try again for a girl?
Oh, absolutely not. No, yeah. And we had told ourselves like no matter what. We like swore in blood. We got on our knee. We committed that this is the last try, and we're going no more than four. Because one, just being in, we live in LA, and
Mm,
our friends think we're crazy, and especially family outside of LA. Like, how do you do it? There's 6 people in your family, and it's one of the things that we had as a value. Like when we first moved to LA, we kept meeting so many people who were leaving once they had a family because they said we can't
mm,
afford it, or Hollywood is too crazy. I don't want to raise my family in LA. And we just kept hearing that over and over again. So it was one of our like commitments as a family is we said we want to prove that not only can you raise a family in LA, but you can thrive in LA with a family. And so that's kind of been our stewardship. But yes, we would have stopped at 4 boys. And or God said, you won't stop. And so let me give you a girl.
mm. Wow. Well, I'm glad you got there. Joe, you might know this, but I always ask one question. What were you like in high school?
Mm. What was I like in high? I was like two versions of me in high school,
Mm.
you know. So my freshman and sophomore year, I was extremely nerdy. I was the chubby kid who had baby fat all the way through middle school, but kept on till high school and had a small group of friends. But I was very introverted. I was a social recluse. Still to this day, I deal with social
Mm.
anxiety. Big groups of people terrify me, and so it was me and like two friends for my first 2 years of high school. And I love sports. So for me, I wasn't very good at sports, and I wasn't very good socially, but it was like my escape. And
Mm.
so I played basketball, I played baseball, and was very to myself. And then junior year, all of a sudden, like the baby fat dropped. I went from glasses. When I played sports, I wore the sports goggles. If you remember, you
Hmm.
know, just look. My teammates called me Turtle. That was my nickname because I literally look like a turtle. So all of a sudden, junior, I go from no baby fat, go from goggles to contacts,
Mm.
grow like 6 inches, which I'm still only 5'9", so I'm still short, but you know, and and all of a sudden it really felt like I became a different person.
Mm.
And and it was so bizarre to have never any girls interested in you ever, and then all of a sudden one girl's interested in you and you feel like the whole world is interested. So I became that girl crazy, all this stuff. But for me, a huge marker in my life as a high schooler, and I feel like that's carried with me, has been this idea that there's something inside of me that's waiting to be unleashed.
Mm.
And I could feel that as a high school, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I was born to do. Right? I didn't know what I was created to do, and but I knew that it was in there. And I
Mm.
feel like there was seeds that were planted through high school and different moments, and just being drawn to the heroic narrative. And then the irony for me is like, yeah, kind of what I shared. I'm a social recluse. I had a
Yeah.
speech impediment all the way through college. And and so one thing I knew that I would never do with my life would be like to communicate, to be like
Ugh.
a speaker, because I'm not good at it. It
Yeah.
terrifies me. And then as I got older into college, and then now just in life and job and responsibilities, it's just hilarious that a huge part of what I do now with my life is actually communicating.
I'm
And
excited to I'm excited to dig into that because I think some of the best communicators I've ever come across have like dealt with social anxiety. and I'm just, and sometimes you see it like when they're off camera,
Mm.
and then you hear them talk. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah,
I
sure.
wish I could be like you.
Yeah, totally. 100%. Yeah. And it's like for me, is a huge component of it is in relation to my intimacy with God
Mm,
and just having a like come to Jesus moment in college where I'd always believed in God, but it was never close enough to
yeah.
know him by name, was never practicing anything that I had heard or learned about in the scriptures or, so I would have identified myself as a person of faith that did not have a deep faith, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
A hundred
And
percent.
yeah, and then all of a sudden I have this moment with God where I just feel so alive and I'm just asking, I want to hear your voice, I want to hear your voice, I want to hear your voice. And then all of a sudden I just keep hearing his voice saying, I want you to use your voice, use your voice, use your voice. And it terrified me. And I say this all the time. Like I'm a self-proclaimed coward. I have so many fears, more than I wish were true. But for me, I love fear
Mm,
because you cannot have courage without fear. And I think a huge part of my story has not been the elimination of fear, but really the growth of my courage, saying, I'm not going to let what terrifies me stop me from doing what I long to do. And so, yeah, that's been a huge part of my journey, just as a human, as a man, is just saying yes to the things that really scare me to death.
I love that. I'm thinking about like your transformation in high school from like chubby with goggles, then all of a sudden, first of all, I'm 5'6", so 5'9" is like a giant to me. So there's that. I wish I could be 5'9". My wife wishes I could be 5'9" when like she's like asking for the cereal box. I'm getting the step stool. I'm like, oh, great.
For sure. Yeah. I'm
But I'm
still
just
step school life. So
a
yeah.
hundred percent. But I'm just imagining like when Steve Urkel turns into Stefan, and then all of a sudden everybody's interested, right?
Yeah, yeah. And the I wish it was like that. I wish I had it like Stefan or Kel, but because it was just when you have no attention and you even get a little bit of attention, you just all of a sudden feel like, oh, like a whole world of possibilities
Mhm.
have opened up. But I think for me, and it's such a vain thing in terms of like your physical appearance, but it was huge because I was always a kid who dealt with insecurities. I
Mhm.
still really struggle with that. And I think what was happening in that time was I had to rely on the fact that if there's not a deep character that roots me in who I am, I'm going to blow with the wind as vain conversations and such shallow, you know, frameworks around the world are being put into me. And I think that was a huge part of me in high school is I didn't realize it until a decade later when I'm in my mid 20s that I was so thankful for the seeds of character growth that
Mhm.
my parents and people close to me put in me that I didn't think truly mattered until the roots went deep.
Mhm.
And then I had to really make hard decisions in life that uh, I had to decide who I wanted to become.
Yeah, 100%. So you mentioned that up until college, you were a believer, but you were or a person of faith, but you never really practiced the things that you might have known, and you didn't have a deep relationship or an intimate relationship with God. Did you grow up in the church, and like what did your lifestyle really look like perhaps in high school and up until that moment to where
Sure.
you're a believer? Because I can relate to that. I think a lot of the listeners might be able to as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I kind of had an interesting upbringing where my dad was in the Air Force.
Mm,
And so he was a raging alcoholic all throughout his young 20s. And he ends up, basically no other way to put it, he knocks my mom up when they're dating. And at the same time, he gets a DUI, his third
mm,
DUI, and he's about to get removed from the Air Force. And they said the only way you'll be able to stay is if you go to rehab. So my mom is 6 months pregnant, and he has to decide: am I going to go to rehab to get my life in order? That I may not be able to be there for my son's birth, but it can ensure that I'm there for his life.
mm.
And so he goes to rehab. He's not there when I'm born, and overcomes that addiction. Now 39 years later. He has not had a sip of alcohol. Such a story of redemption is beautiful, and my dad's the best man that I have ever known. And so that happens. And then for about 7 years, he's not a person of faith at all, but he has a narrative of with AA and a higher power. And so it's always there. And while he's at work one day when I'm 7 years old, some coworkers decide, hey, we're doing a Bible study and we want to invite this guy. So they invite him. And over the course of a few months, he decides to give his life to Jesus. So
Mm,
from my birth until I was 7 years old, we never talked about God. I couldn't even tell you who God was, never heard Jesus. Sundays for me were all about like football because I was a
mm,
massive NFL, and then golf. Like whoever was on the leaderboard at the end. That was what I did on Sundays. And then all of a sudden, my dad comes home and he starts talking about Jesus. And he's like, "We're going to church now." I'm like, "I don't want to go to church. I want to watch football." Right. And my mom was so far from God. She said, "Absolutely not. I will never, blankety blank, 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 go to that church." Uh, and so it was a year where my dad just took me and my brother to church every Sunday. And then all of a sudden we go from being one of the most irreligious families we've ever known to now we're in church every
mm.
Sunday and every Wednesday. And then about a year and a half into that, my mom ends up becoming a follower of Christ as well. And so then now, my dad's a deacon. And so I grow up in church really from that point on, all through high school and through college, just knew how to act like you believed enough for people to think that were close to God.
Mm.
And then one day in college, I had a really bad day. I don't know if you've ever had those, kind
Had
of.
had a couple, but
Yep.
I'd love to know what yours was like.
Yeah, it was just one of those where I lied about something in the morning, and then I had to lie about what I lied about in the afternoon,
Mm.
and then I had to cover the lie that I lied about in the afternoon at night, and it was just embarrassing, lie after lie after lie after lie. And then it was one night in my room, I was just so humiliated at the person that I had become,
Mm.
and that I was such a facade, and my soul was empty, and I knew it, and I didn't know how to fix it, but I knew something needed to be realigned. And so one night I just went into my closet and there was a Bible that was super dusty, hadn't been opened in a really long time. And I just remember years earlier, a pastor one time preached a message about like closing your eyes, open up the Bible, and then just pointing to a place and that God will speak to you. And so I was really hungry, really desperate. So I just did it. Closed my eyes, opened the book, pointed to a verse, and it was like a genealogy. So and so, the brother, so and so, and I was like, I knew
Yeah.
it. This is bogus. Like, I can't believe I actually believed that this would work.
And that's what they like teach you not to do now.
100%. Yeah. It's like, it's so like, it's magic. And you think that, it's not meaning, it's magic. But what was happening to me is I was hungry. And so I just felt like I heard God say, because I was about to close the Bible, and I felt I heard him say, "Are you going to give up that easy?"
Mm.
Like you say you're desperate, you say you want something to shift and change, but it doesn't seem like you're very hungry. And so I just kept flipping and reading and flipping and reading, and then finally I got to like a verse that shook me at my core, and it was in Psalm 34. And I read the first 7 verses, and they were beautiful. But then I got to verse 8, and it said, "Taste and see that the Lord is good." And I can't explain it, but it went from words on a page to like a voice in my soul.
Mm.
And I felt like God just challenged me at my core, saying, "I think you've always known of who I am, but you've never taken the time to actually get to know what truly matters to me." And so I just closed the Bible and I just said, "All right, God, if you'll have me, I'm all yours." And it led me on a journey here now 20 years later where I just feel so like alive and so thankful and so blessed that there was a God who saw me even at my lowest moment, and he pulled out the best in me.
So I'm not Am I not going to do it? Yeah. I won't ask you the details about the lie if you don't want to share them, even though the podcast is
Oh,
called Oversharing.
I'm totally open. Yeah, absolutely. I will share whatever you want me to. Yeah.
Let's Donnie Darko it and start from the end. Is that Donnie Darko? Yes. Um, did you get caught in this lie?
No. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a
Didn't get.
great that's good conviction at the end then.
Yep. Didn't get caught. And that's it. I work a lot with leadership development and life coaching, and that's a huge component that I talk with a lot of my guys about. Is there's a difference. There's a huge difference in momentum when you're caught and when you confess, right? And
Mm,
it's not about, not even you have to confess to somebody, confess to me, but even just being honest about what's going on. And that was me. I didn't get caught. Nobody, but I knew I caught myself.
mm,
Right. And I knew again, back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, I knew that there was something more in me. I didn't know what it was. I knew there was value, and there was insights, and there was, some type of heroic nature. I really believe that,
mm,
but it was buried under the rubble of the destructive choices that I was making and the
for sure.
self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And I just had to have a moment where I was like, yeah, nobody else needs to know about this. And later I shared those things
Yeah.
to people that were in my life and whatnot. But I first had to share them with myself and share
Mm,
them with God to go, this is who I have become, but I don't want to be this person anymore. And I love my boss, my mentor, my pastor, Erwin McManus. He says this, one of my favorite quotes is, he says, we're all hypocrites in transition.
hmm,
And the moment we are just honest about that we're not who we used to be, right? We don't want to be who we are, but in the hands of God and with a humble heart and a willing spirit, it's crazy the person that we can become. And so I believed in that Joe who had yet to be unleashed, but I knew I had to fight for him that day because
yeah.
it was like a cross, a fork in the road moment where if you don't shift, you're not going to be able to experience all of the wonder that I have for you. And that's what because I believed in the goodness of God, and I still do. But I think a lot of times the goodness of God is just trapped in the mundane choices that we make every single day.
100%. So what happened?
What happened? Like in like what?
What
I'll
was
tell you.
this lie that you had to cover up so much and just buried you?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't even remember. It wasn't even something crazy. It was probably related to a girl. Honestly, probably wanted to like hang out with the girl, probably mess around with the girl. And my mom was once she never went to church, and then she went to church. She took church very seriously. So
Mm.
she was a old school, right? I was more terrified of my mom than I was of God. And and so that was probably some of it, and I was just doing things I shouldn't have been doing. If my mom ever found out,
Mhm.
she would kill me, and then I would truly meet God. Um, and so yeah, I don't even remember the full details of it. I just remember it was just like I kept having to lie to not get caught, you
Yeah.
know, and it was just like that, and that was the big thing. It was just I would become a person of deceit,
Yeah.
and because I think that's the mistake so many of us make is that we're especially if you're on a search for God, if you're on a journey for like trying to make sense of who God is and make sense of who you are. I think a lot of times we think that we can't be who we truly are with God because he's going to condemn us. He's going to judge us. He's, going to hoard it over our heads. But the beauty of who God is that one, he already knows who we are. And
Mhm.
he's like, no, I just want you to be congruent. I want you to be like transparent. I want you to be honest so that you can allow me to shape you into the you that the world desperately needs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I had to go through that just pruning process, that hard, work in progress, rebuilding, and it took time.
Yeah.
Like I had that moment in my bedroom, and I wish I could say I woke up the next day and I was like just all of a sudden the best version of myself and everything that the world needed, but it wasn't. Like it
Mm.
it took day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment. And I remember 6 months later, I remember having a day. I was at work and I was on my lunch break, and I just remember sitting there going, "Oh wow, I'm different.
Mm.
Like I've actually changed. Like I'm a new creation. I'm a new person. Like I'm me all of a sudden. And it felt so freeing and it felt so rewarding. But sometimes you just got to have that. You got to let maturity, you know, take its space. And sometimes you can't rush that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling of, I think sometimes the bigger thing of like when you're lying to somebody, and then obviously when you have to cover it up and then cover it up, when you're lying to somebody, for anybody that's, feels any sort of conviction in their heart, it's not as much, sometimes it's not as much even the lie that you're saying. It's more that you wake up in the morning. It's not like you woke up that morning, you're like, you know what, I'm a liar and I'm really good at it, I'm gonna do that. You
Yeah.
probably woke up that morning, you're like, I'm a pretty good dude. Like, I think I'm a good dude. I'm supposed to be. I come from this great background, or I have great parents. I'm in college, like all this stuff. And then the end of the day, you're in bed, you're like, I'm not that dude.
Yeah.
And that, I think a lot of people can relate to that.
100%. Yeah. And I think a lot of times you have to have those moments where you can lie in bed with no other voices, with no other like trying to fight for the image that you think other people want from you or that you have to portray.
Mm,
And to just have that human moment laying in bed with lights off, voices silenced. To then I think those are the moments I think when God speaks most profoundly because it's just the truth of the matter, and then it's just this this call to more. And I love that. And that was and that's been the catapult of my life ever since.
mm,
It hasn't been the focus on, okay, yeah, don't be a liar anymore, right? Or don't be deceitful. But what's actually the most good in the world that you can do? What's the choice that you can make that is going to not just unleash your greatness, but also unleash the greatness in others?
yeah.
And and that's been my life commitment. Like I love seeing other people thrive.
Mm,
I love seeing and having a hand in that. Like knowing, oh, I was a part of uh, that story, that unleashing, and that's what I chose to give my life to. Like I another seminal moment for me. I remember kind of like again with the conversation around communication. Uh, the pastor of a church I was a part of at the time came to me one week and he said, "Hey, I want you to speak next Sunday." And up until that point, I'd never done an announcement. I had never spoken anywhere. He knew that my biggest fear in life was public speaking, and it made no sense at all. So he said, "I want you to speak next Sunday." And I said, "Hey, I respect you and love you, but absolutely not." And then the next week he came back and he said, "Hey, I want you to speak next Sunday." And I said, "No, I will never do that. You know that that is terrifying, and I wouldn't be good. So find somebody else." And he just kept asking
mm,
week after week. And then finally he just like beat me down and I said, "Okay, I'll do it one time." And I spoke, and I was supposed to be 20-minute talk. I spoke for like 9.5 minutes, and it was the worst. I had them burn the tapes. No one will ever see this or hear this ever. And at least I was like, thank God it's over. And then he came back to me. He said, "I want you to speak again next month."
oh boy.
Oh boy, exactly. Yeah. And it was the most stressful month of my life trying to figure out, God, why would you do this to me?
Yeah.
And and then that next time when I spoke, it was a moment that changed me forever. I was in the back room and I was literally hyperventilating in a paper bag, just anxiety, fear, embarrassed. And this friend of mine who's like my second mom comes in the room while I'm freaking out. And she's like, "What is going on?" And I say, "I don't want to do this. I'm going to be horrible. People are going to laugh at me. I'm going to stutter. I stutter in front of people. And so, like, why would I ever want to do this to myself?" And she put her arm around me and she, like a good, strong Black mama would do, she kept it real. And with her arm around me, she said, "The moment you realize it's not about you, you'll be fine."
Mm,
And then she walked out of the room, didn't give me a hug, didn't console me, just made me sit in my like arrogance and self wallowing and all of this like pride. Because a lot of times, we have a misconception of pride. We think pride is only when you like think so highly of yourself. But the reality is that we're prideful when we think so lowly of ourselves as well, because the focus is still all about ourselves. And and I was filled with pride. In that moment, I had to decide: do I care more about myself, or do I actually care more about helping other people find their greatness?
Wow.
And I got on that stage, and before I got on, I prayed. I said, God, if you'll be with me, every single room, every single platform, every single opportunity, if you just promise you'll be with me, I'll say yes, even though it'll terrify me. And and that's, yeah, been my journey as a communicator for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Is As I feel unqualified, I feel terrified, but at the same time, there's nothing that brings me more life, because I feel like God's given me something to say.
Yeah. Man, it's so interesting to know where you came from with that, because I'm a big fan of your the sermons that you preach in at Mosaic. I turn them on. Some of them have been on repeat. I've shared clips of it on my Instagram, and I'm
Mm,
just like, this doesn't sound like anybody that's ever dealt with that anxiety, that's ever perhaps even dealt with a speech impediment or that sort of lack of self-confidence. And I can't imagine that. And perhaps actually I probably could imagine, but it's like, maybe the listener, it's like, okay, might not be able to see, like, okay, there was that change from that one day, but there's still a process to get to where you are today. You're saying that was 15 years ago. This wasn't, all of a sudden, like, all of a sudden you're great at what you're doing. But what
yeah,
does that work look like after that day? Like, how did you feel when you walked off the stage that day?
yeah. I felt free.
Mm,
Yeah, I felt free because for the first time, I felt like my strength was bigger than the fear. Because I think a lot of times what we want when it comes to whatever your fear is, right? For me, it's public speaking, right? It was my speech impediment, it was my stutters. For you, it could be fear of intimacy. For you, it could be like the feeling of inadequacy. Like you have dreams and visions and goals, but you feel like you don't have the resources to accomplish them. Like whatever your fear, we all have fears that we deal with. But the lie that we tell ourselves, especially when it comes to God, is that we want the fears and the obstacles to be eliminated. And if they're eliminated, we'll finally be able to do the very thing that we want to do. But the problem with that is that if the fear is eliminated, if the obstacle is eliminated, then the growth opportunity is as well. And we'll never be able to become the strongest version of ourselves outside of that fear, outside of that struggle, right? It's the human story. Like the human story is a struggle, is a story of struggle. It's a story of pain. It's a story of overcoming. And without it, we would be left weaker. And I think the reason God allows us to, to still wrestle with that fear is because it's the material that he uses to actually develop our strongest self. And and that was like for me, like I had to just like go straight through the fire. Like there was no other way. And that growth, right, space over these 15 years has been so many highs and so many lows. There's so many great messages and moments that I feel like just the stars aligned, and I feel like God just gave me like fresh insight and a belief that would shake people at their core. And I left the stage going like, I am him. Just being honest, right? Like I have this moments like, yeah, I'm him, right? And there's been other moments where I just felt so unworthy. I felt like I blew it. I feel like I
mm,
didn't honor the moment, but the commitment that I made to myself and the commitment that I made to God was that I wouldn't let the highs be my story always, and I wouldn't let the lows be my story. But actually, I would let the faithfulness of my journey carry itself out.
mm.
And yeah, and it's funny enough, like we have at Mosaic, we have a security team that's incredible, and we're in Hollywood, and so there's a lot of just craziness that happens, and so we want to create a safe space for our people who come. And but one of our security guards one time comes up to me and he goes, man, that message today, whoo, you is on it. Because I remember when you started, you were not that good, you know. And he didn't mean any shade at all. Like he was just genuinely trying to celebrate, going like, bro, you've grown so much. And I laughed and I love that moment because you have to let people have the freedom to be bad
Hmm.
so that they can, create the space and the opportunity to find their greatness.
Yeah.
And I'm just so thankful that we have that at Mosaic. It's one of the amazing things I love about our church and my boss, my pastor, is that he has given his life to giving people like me opportunities that maybe nobody else would, that nobody else saw. And you can be really bad, but that's going to be the material for when your greatness is truly unleashed.
Mm. One of the ideas I think is kind of interesting is you being able to step up and preach in front of, whether it was 5 people or 500 people. Now it's, you know, probably hundreds, if not thousands of people that you get to speak in front of. Definitely in the beginning, did you deal with any feelings of like, why should I even be the one? Talent aside, fear aside, whatever, like, we all have our messes that
Mm.
we're dealing with, and it's like being able to go up there in the midst of your mess and still preach something from your soul and know that it is true. Like, what is that process like for you? Because I think that's what holds a lot of people back from speaking up, whether it's online or in front of people or whatever the case is. They don't feel like they're worthy, or they think that their life is too messed up to start speaking about something that they believe in, even though they're not fully embodied in it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Like my name is Joe Smith, right? And so it's hilarious. Like I wish I had Mikhail. Like it's a legend, right? I see it written in stone somewhere, but I didn't have Joe Smith, right? The most average common name. And that has always been part of my like tension and my journey, feeling like there's a hero inside, right? Something that I was born to do that nobody else on this planet could do. But at the same time, being extremely average in my name, extremely average. Like I was a 3 point out of 3.0 grade point average in both high school and college, right? The epitome of average, right? And and that was like the voice in my head. You'll never be nothing more than average. Why you? Why Joe Smith? Right? And like God can't do anything with you, or why do you think you're so special? And it's still a voice that I have to like silence and allow God to speak into. It's still there. It's not nearly as loud as it used to be. But I think the reason that that's important, I love that question that you had, is because I think we all at some point deal with uh, why me, right? What, especially in the context of faith, why would God choose to do something through me? Because we think if God does something through me, then that means he may not have something for someone else.
Mm.
And I think it's the opposite. Is that when we all tap into our greatness, the thing that God birthed inside of us, that he knitted together in our mama's womb, right? That very thing that he said the world needed through us, when every single human being on the planet discovers that uniqueness, I think it opens up new pathways and new futures, and it gives people the freedom and permission to not just believe that there's greatness inside of them, but to give their life to discovering that greatness.
Mm.
And my wife is from New Zealand, and um, I call her, she's my hobbit, I love her. And New Zealand has this interesting cultural phenomenon called the tall poppy syndrome. And it's a part of the culture that they really have to fight through. And it was a huge thing with her coming to America. And what the tall poppy syndrome is there's poppy plants that grow really, really high, and farmers would have to go and cut them. But that's what New Zealand does in their culture. That every single time somebody like rises to the top, somebody elevates, they have to come and they have to cut them down
Mm.
because it's not okay that you think you're better than us. And it feels like there's this like commonality, this kinship of when we all just become one and we lower the standard. But I think that's just not how we were created to live. I think we were supposed to let the tall poppies get as tall as they can and believe that in their elevation they'll actually change the environment. And I want to be that type of person. I want to be that type of leader. I want to be that type of husband, that type of father, where where I don't need to like choose average so that we're all the same.
Mm,
Like I want to elevate who I am and who I was created to be. I want to live at such a high standard that the people around me go, if he could do it, if God could do something through even average Joe Smith, like imagine what he could do with me.
mm. I love that, man. I think that's one of the things I've been thinking about quite a bit lately, and I think that God's put on my heart is like, how do we start to live at that higher level when sometimes our circumstances, don't allow it, or I wouldn't say don't allow it, because I would guess that's up to us, but more so like there's some pushback, from circumstances, whether that's like, friends or community that are like, oh, Joe Smith is getting a big head. Like he's real great at, he's great at Mosaic. Who does he think he is? Like that whole thing. Like I'm sure that there's been moments perhaps where you might get that vibe from somebody. Have you been able to like, kind of sidestep some of those things or address some of those things?
Yeah. I mean, one, marriage helps. Like I'm sure, I'm sure you've experienced this, with your wife, and my wife's a miss. She's the most encouraging person in my life. She's my number one champion, and there's moments where I wouldn't make it if it wasn't for her belief in me. Just to be honest. So I want to start there. But she's also the person who's the realist with me, and she doesn't even have to say it. I could hear it in her tone. I could see it in her eyes, right? And we have that proximity with each other to where we keep each other honest and accountable, that we're doing things for the right reasons, right? But also for me, I think what helps in that, because yeah, I mean I've gotten tagged in on every social media platform and blasted about how things that I've said that are terrible, and lies that have been spread about, and it used to really shake me,
Mm,
especially when you're like when you know yourself, like because I know I've blown it and messed up on so many things and so many times, and I have no problem owning that. But it's really hard when you're like when it's not true and you feel like
mm,
I gotta fight for truth. But here's the thing, like the truth will always outlive a lie. It may not immediately, but I think a lot of times we fight for the truth or the perception of how other people see us, when I think we should just fight for believing that our character will sustain through all the lies and all the deceit.
mm,
And and so yeah, when people say things, or I'm not, this happened a lot. Like people will come to Mosaic because we have, probably the greatest communicator on the planet, in my opinion, in Pastor Irwin, and I love it. And people come and they want to hear him, and then I'm speaking that week, and so I'll get side eyes, and I'll get text messages, through our different platforms of like throwing shade that I can't believe like this guy spoke, and I just want to hear Irwin. And I could either go, look, I can't believe people are saying this about me, or can't believe they didn't love my message, whatever. But I just go, hey, I wish he was speaking all the time too. Oh yeah, I wish I would have been better today too. And I just own it that I'm not going to be everything for everyone. I'm not going to give a perfect message. I'm not trying to give a perfect message every time I speak.
mm.
I'm trying to bring the truth of what God has put into my spirit, and know that it may not serve everyone, but I have a feeling that it's going to serve some.
Yeah.
And that's what helps me when the haters come, which they do, and the disappointment comes, or even just moments when I wish I was better. I just learned how to be okay with bringing my full self and all of my great moments and my great insights and all the things that I wish that I had said differently. Because I think that's what all God wants, is he wants us to show up. He wants us to bring to the table the very thing that he put inside of us. And then he's like, let me worry about the rest.
Yeah. How has it been for you, being a pastor at a church where, the environment around, it's not like the environments around it, questionable is the only word that's coming to mind right now.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
Like pastoring those types of people, and let's just be frank about the conversation, right? It happens a lot here in Orange County, and I was one of these people as well, where I'm out Saturday night getting tanked and probably show up to service smelling like booze and whatever I was doing the night before, right?
Sure.
Um and I was still going to church. I was checking a box, and I don't want to put a label on what LA might be like, but I think that there's some of that maybe everywhere. How do you navigate through something like that? How do you start to, pastor those who have faith, but they're not perhaps living by what they're learning on Sundays?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things is I don't feel like it's my responsibility to change anyone who does not want to change. I don't know if it's my responsibility to help anyone who doesn't want to be helped, to pastor, to invest. So even on a Sunday, like when I'm bringing a message, I'm not trying to convince anyone, right? I'm maybe trying to convince them of a new insight or a new understanding of God or themselves or the scriptures, right? But I'm not trying to like manipulate anyone to believe something that they don't want to believe. I'm just trying to chip in the wall. I'm trying to find the little cracks. I'm looking for people who are open to the
Mm.
possibility that maybe even though I'm a mess, right? Even though I went and got wasted last night and I showed up in church today, even though like I've been sleeping around and making destructive choices, even though I've been whatever X, Y, and Z, if God is out there, if he's who these people are talking about who he is, I'm open to the possibility that I'll give him a shot. See, that's the person I'm looking for, because I want that person to know that it doesn't matter how many times you've blown it. It doesn't matter how many times that you've got it wrong. It doesn't even matter how confused you are. Uh, all God is looking for is an open heart and a willing spirit. And and I love the fact that in at Mosaic, every single Sunday we have Buddhist and atheist and agnostics and Scientologists and Jewish people. Like every single Sunday, I meet somebody who the first introduction is, "Hi, my name is so and so, and I'm an atheist and I do not believe in God." Right?
Mm.
I love that the room is filled with skeptics. Like I don't know if I would have been able to last in Mosaic for. I've been there 15 years now. If it was just a room full of people who believed what I believed, I think I just would get bored, or just be an echo chamber. Uh, like I tell this to my team a lot. Like every Sunday feels like an away game. Like in sports, everyone loves playing a home game, right? You shoot better, right? The comfortability just increases your productivity, and across the board in every sport, you play better when you're at home. But then when you go on the road and it's an away game, all of a sudden you shrink to the lowest, like it feels like, version of yourself. And at Mosaic on Sundays, it's an away game. We have people that are just so stoic, and I see them in the crowd. I see their arms folded. I see them like cursing me with their eyes, being like, "I don't want to be. I'm only here because I'm trying to sleep with this girl next to me." Like
Oh
I know
boy.
all the stories,
Yeah.
but for me, that's what I live for. I love that person who does not want to believe and is so filled with doubt and envy and questioning. I love not necessarily even that person coming to know who Jesus is at the
Mm.
end of the gathering. I hope they do, but a lot of times they don't. See, I love just opening up more the possibility by the end of that 30 minutes, the question mark of, dang, I don't actually want to think about what this guy said, but now I can't get it out of my mind. And that's for me the thrill of us being in Hollywood, is that every week we have people who are so far from God and so closed off that hopefully after those 30 minutes and during that time that they have on our campus, we've pried them open a little bit more to then let God do what he can do in the moments when I'm never going to be around.
Mm.
And I love being a part of those stories. And yeah, Hollywood is crazy. I mean, it is, but we say it's our crazy.
Yeah.
Like we feel we've been called there, and we're on the corner of Hollywood and La Brea, and it is pure madness and chaos. But I think that's exactly where Jesus would have been, right in the middle of the chaos.
100%. That's definitely where he was, right? And it's like, and I love how you phrase that. And the more and more that I've been able to learn, to the the more that I've been able to learn, I realize that yeah, we should be defending the faith, but at the same time, when it comes to those who might not be there yet, we just, like you said, we have to bring them from not believing to curious,
Yep.
and then the rest is up to God. And it's great to hear that from you, as somebody who has a lot of influence in a really vulnerable area, I think, because unfortunately, I think that what gets put in the media so much is like it isn't, it's not what this life is about. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's so much condemnation, it's so much judgment, it's the opposite of what it's supposed to be. And I hope that the listeners gets far enough to understand like that's not it at all.
Mm, yeah. Like my kids go to school in Hollywood as well, right down the street from where the church is. And I've been in a conversation with the head of school for the last 2 years. And, we have a great relationship. She brought me on to open up the school one year for a non-religious blessing, which I love
Mhm.
that. I love that they were like, we know what you do and we want what you do, but because there's so many people who do not believe in God, and we have to be careful. It can't be a prayer, it can't be a blessing. Can you do a non-religious blessing? Like I love that I was the guy who they asked for this, right? So I do, and it just opens up this whole door of people going like, oh my god, like what is it that you do again, and what's Mosaic, and and I just had all these conversations that have come from it, and then there's this really massive chaotic situation at the school that happened this year, a kid threatening with a gun and just a lot of drama, and the school went into massive crisis mode. And I'm working with the school, just handling how to communicate with parents. I'm in meetings with the head of school and the assistant principal, going, how do we handle? I have no affiliation to this school. Like they have all these experts, and they're resourcing me, a person of faith, person who believes something completely different than every single one of their staff. And I love that I'm the person that they call in the middle of the crisis, because there's something about when you have the like spirit of the living God, that when people don't even know how to describe it, or even they don't even understand what it is, it'll be the very thing that they resource when they need it the most. And then it can begin these conversations about who God is, about who Jesus is. And then just 2 weeks ago, this head of school all of a sudden is in tears, just one telling me thank you so much for just what you and your family have meant to the school. And we have a billboard at Mosaic that right across the street from the church that we just put messages on for the city. And it's cool because people all around the city, before they ever go to Mosaic, they know about the billboard. I'm like, oh, I remember you guys said this. Well, right now we have on the billboard, it just says, it's like a text message that our creative team made. And it says, simple, I love you, dash Jesus. And my head of school is just in tears, going, I drive by Mosaic every single day, and I've seen your billboard for the last 5 years, and I saw it today, and it wrecked me, and I just started weeping.
Mm.
Just started weeping, thinking there's somebody who loves me. And even though she doesn't know who he is, she doesn't even understand all the weight and power of that declaration, a message as simple as I love you, but in the right environment, can not just change a person's life, it can change a culture of a school, it can change the future of an organization, right? The entire board of this school is Jewish and agnostic, and they keep resourcing Mosaic to like lead their teams and their organizations and these moments of crisis, because they know that there's something that we offer that they need. And
Mm.
and I love that I don't have to tell them and beat them over the head that, oh, it's Jesus, but I get to be a part of the visible representation of who Jesus is in their life.
Wow. That's incredible, man. I love the work that you've been doing. Love like the word that you put out. And I actually look forward to the Joseph videos or videos on the Mosaic YouTube. So
Mm.
just so you know.
Nah, I appreciate that. All you need is one. It's fine.
um, you've been really gracious to share a lot today, and I appreciate it. Before I ask the last question of today, though, if somebody wants to connect with you, how can they find you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, the biggest thing for me, like Mosaic is my home, it's my tribe. Like, especially if you're listening here and you're maybe a person like we've been talking about, a skeptic, a person who's questioning and trying to figure out who Jesus is and who God is and who you are, man, I think Mosaic would be the very thing that your soul longs for. And so, one, like listen to Mosaic podcast. You can find it on YouTube, our website, podcast app. And then, I'm a social guy as well, social media. I just did a a rebrand with my name. Speaking of the Joe Smith and all that, I'm working on. So my Instagram now is at Joseph Keith Smith,
Mm,
full name. And yeah, this just excited to this year. I'm working on some projects with friends who are producers. So we're producing a film this year. That's going to be really beautiful. I'm writing some stuff and gonna working on books and
amazing.
programs, and so yeah, some of that stuff will be coming soon too. And but yeah, man, I love that you are always creating space with your platform to just highlight others and people who are doing really amazing things around the world. And so, yeah, really appreciate you and all you do.
I appreciate that, man. All right, last question of the day. I mean, I'm thinking about it now. You grew up in high school as the proverbial Steve Urkel, I guess you could say, and you're still stepping into that Stefan Urkel potentially. But now, like, we've gone from social anxiety to a stutter to not believing to yourself. Now you're speaking in front of hundreds of people every week. You have books coming out, films coming out, everything like that. And you mentioned that there were seeds planted along the way. Now looking back at all of that and seeing all of the things that you're up to, that God's been doing in your life, so on and so forth, what are some of the most important seeds that were planted that are starting to grow and sprout now?
Yeah, I mean, first thing that pops in my head is I had a friend of mine uh, who tragically passed away during COVID, and just a dear brother, but he's been a mentor in my life for almost 20 years. And and the one thing he said to me when I was in college around that age is he said, "You are greater than you could ever imagine." And it was a simple statement. You're greater than you could ever imagine. I just wrote it on a piece of paper, put it in my wallet. I wrote it on my mirror. Like, you're greater than you could ever imagine. Because there was two parts of that statement. One, just this idea of greatness that was in me that I had to fight for, that it didn't come naturally to me. For some people it does, it didn't for me. So I was like, okay, there's greatness in me. And then greater than I could ever imagine. That one of the most powerful things that I get to do is imagine a future better than the present. To imagine that there's more to do than even we have an idea of. And just those two things about greatness and imagination have just been a root in my life, that I want to become the greatest version of myself, because I think that is what will serve the world the most. And I want to unleash the greatness in others, because that's what's going to actually continue the legacy of what I was born to do. And then I want to have an imagination that is endless, that I see a world that's more beautiful than the present. I see a world that is like, even for my kids, having 4 kids now, it's crazy. I know you're, expecting your first child. Oh, I hope that's public. If not, you can edit
Oh
this
yeah,
out.
it is. It is.
Okay. I realize I don't want to be the, TMZ, but yeah, you realize when kids enter the story, everything changes, because you have new texture to your life. You have new responsibility. You feel the weight of not just how you need to care for them, but how you need to pave the way,
Mhm.
and that they're going to ride on the backs of your sacrifice and your legacy. And for me, man, those kids are my everything. And that's like where the dreams and the desires and the ambitions, and like there's still so many things that I want to do. I'm turning 40 this year,
Mm.
and I was talking with a friend recently, and she said, wow, 40 years, like this is about to be your 40th year is going to set the, like, the path, the foundation for the next 40 great years of your life. And I've loved the first 40 years that I've had. Like it's been an absolute joy. I wouldn't trade my life with anything. But man, there's so much more that I want to do. And there's so much greatness that I need to unleash, because I believe that if I can be a steward of what God's called me to do, and to risk greatly and to dream more than I could ever imagine, then just maybe, even if it's one person that could see that if he did it, man, I have to give my life to seeing what it is that God put me on this earth to do. Because that's the thing that's been wrecking me recently, is I've been thinking about like just humans, and just the fact that one of one. There's
Mhm.
never been another. There will never be another. And so I was just doing research, and they estimate that there have been 100 billion people that have walked the earth. And just thinking about that, 100 billion people, and in the complete uniqueness and majesty of who God is. And in his imagination, he created 100 billion one of ones.
Mm.
Every single human that's ever entered into the human story is because God said there's something the world needs that only you can bring. And I'm not gonna like die until I'm gonna die. I'm gonna go guns blazing on my last breath, and it's gonna start with these four incredible gifts that God's given me and these kids. But I hope it extends for hundreds, for thousands, for millions, and helping people know that there's something that only you can bring to the world, and God knew the world needed it, and the only way the world's going to actually be better is when you discover why you're here.
I love that, man. That's beautiful. Thank you again for all this time, for everything that you shared. And to the listener, thank you for your time and attention. We really appreciate it. If you love the episode, we would dig a 5-star review. If you didn't like it that much, feel free to stick it to us, but subscribe anyway, because we're going to have a ton of incredible people just like Joseph Keith Smith back on the show.
No, hey, thank you so much. This has been amazing.